Good morning, class. I want you to turn to page number 73 and continuing with our study in history and that of medieval India, we will come to Delhi Sultanate. Now, in the 9th century, we saw the rise of Cholas, significantly two kings, Rajaraja I and Rajendra Chola I. Now, in the north of India, we learn about the Delhi Sultanate. Now, the sources from which we get to know about the Delhi Sultanate are the inscriptions, Qutub Minar. From these sources, we come to know about the political history and administration of mainly three people or three sultans as such, Qutbuddin Aibak, Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Whatever you see underlined, you are supposed to underline. Whatever terms are explained, you have to note it down as well. By the 10th and 11th centuries, numerous small kingdoms had emerged in North India because of the absence of a powerful central government. So there was no one strong ruler to hold all these kingdoms together. So there was a lot of small kingdoms which sprouted here and there. These kingdoms were constantly at conflict with one another. So all neighbors were fighting with one another to gain control of each other's territory. This lack of political unity was largely responsible for quick victories of the Turks, who began their conquests in the 11th and 12th centuries. However, their empire was established in the 13th century. So all through the 11th and 12th century, the Turks kept on invading India, and the smaller kingdoms, they kept on looting them, but finally they established their rule, or the Delhi Sultanate, from 1206 to 1526, established itself in the 13th century. The period between 1206 and 1526, when 5 dynasties successively ruled from Delhi, is known as the period of Delhi Sultanate. It was so called because the rulers of various dynasties which ruled from their capital at Delhi were called the sultans. Now, the sources. There are a number of official records, administrative manuals, biographies, autobiographies, court histories, chronicles, foreign travelers' accounts, and private correspondence which provide much information for reconstructing the story of the Delhi Sultanate. So, when we are talking about the Delhi Sultanate, children, the history is not so obscure because there are a lot of handwritten documents, texts which are available, biographies and autobiographies of people, of the sultans, of various generals, various foreign travelers who were there, court histories. There were court historians who were appointed by the sultans to note down each and everything. So, we have quite multiple resources from which we get to know about the political history and administration during the Delhi Sultanate. Now, the important source of information about the Delhi Sultanate are inscriptions. Inscriptions are valuable supplements and not the sole source of information on the Delhi Sultanate. We get additional information from these inscriptions, but most of it is coming from, we read manuals, biographies, autobiographies, court histories, chronicles, and accounts of foreign travelers. The inscriptions are found on coins, monuments, milestones, and tombstones. Some of the inscriptions are in Sanskrit, some in Arabic, and some in both the languages. So, as Sanskrit was the medium of, people in India at that time. You see, when we were studying about the Cholas, we learned that most of the inscriptions or the written documents were in Sanskrit and Tamil. So, Sanskrit, not even just in south of India, but in the north of India, was the medium of instruction or medium of learning, you can say. And when the Turks came along, they brought with them Arabic. So inscriptions have been found in both the languages. For example, the first coin issued by Muhammad Bakhtiyar Khilji bears both Arabic and Sanskrit inscriptions. Similarly, the famous traveller Ibn Battuta noticed a commemorative inscription in the Jama Masjid in Delhi which he deciphered. So he was able to reveal what it all said. what the inscription was all about, whose victory or what particular event it was honoring. Then the second source is the monuments. The rulers of Delhi Sultanate built many monuments which reveal not only the cultural trends of the period but also the living conditions, faiths and beliefs and the social cultural outlook of the rulers. So the buildings which came up, the monuments which came up, they reflected the life of the people during those times. Now the most significant of these monuments is Qutub Minar in Delhi. It was started by Qutbuddin Aibak and was dedicated to the Sufi saint Qutbuddin Bakhtiar Kaki, who was greatly venerated by the people of Delhi. Venerated, respected as being holy. The structure was completed by Iltutmish. Its special features are, when originally completed, it rose to a height of 71.4 meters with 4 stories. The tower was damaged by lightning in 1369 and in the course of repairs and renovations, Firoz Shah Tughlaq further raised its height. It has 5 stories tapering as they ascend. Each story is separated from the other by projecting balcony. The entrance is through the doorway on the northern side. Here they have given the picture of the Qutub Minar. Children, there was a time when one could go up to the topmost story of the Qutub Minar, but then people, it was being misused. So only I believe the first floor or the first story is open to the public now, and nobody can go further than that. The minar, as you can see in the picture, is a circular tower about 13.8 meters in diameter at the base. See, at the base the circumference is more, and then as it rises upward it tapers. And tapers to the width of around 3 meters at the summit. It has a circular stairway of 379 steps leading to the top. So the total number of stairs is 379. Red sandstone, marble and grey quartzite were used to construct the tower. Each of the towers has a projecting balcony. You can see, children, the balconies which are projected over here. See, this is the projecting balcony. These balconies are supported in such a way that the whole structure takes the load of weight. Don't wonder that such an old building has lasted so many centuries. So more than if we are talking about 13th century, so more than 700 years. 800 are the children. Why 700? It is 800. Now verses from the Holy Quran and some intricate carvings with floral motifs. Floral motifs, patterns are inscribed on this tower. So now we first come to the slave dynasty. There were 5 successive ruling dynasties, namely the Slave, Khilji, Tughlaq, Sayyid and Lodi dynasties when we talk about the Delhi Sultanate. Muhammad Ghori defeated Prithviraj Chauhan at the Second Battle of Tarai in 1192. Delhi passed into the hands of these rulers later. From Delhi, the Turkish rule was extended into the Gangetic Plains and to Bihar and Bengal. The victorious Turks, before leaving for Afghanistan, left behind a slave general, Qutbuddin Aibak, as viceroy of the conquered lands. So Qutbuddin was left in charge of the captured territories by the Turks. Qutbuddin Aibak, he is regarded as the founder of the slave dynasty. Now let us see why this particular dynasty is known as slave dynasty. The early rulers of this dynasty were called the Mamluk Sultans. The word Mamluk is an Arabic word that means owned. Since these sultans were either the slaves of the Turks or were the sons of the slaves, they were called Mamluk Sultans. Now to complete his master's work, Qutbuddin Aibak embarked on a series of conquests and captured the fort of Kalanjar in Bundelkhand and Anhilwara, capital of Solankis in Gujarat. Besides being a brave and capable military general, Qutbuddin Aibak was a man of letters. He was an educated person. Scholars like Hasan Izmi and Fakhr Mudir adorned his court. Because of liberal distribution, he was very liberal, very free, very kind of money, he earned the title of Lakh Baksh. Baksh means to give. Qutbuddin Aibak laid the foundation of Qutb Minar in Delhi after the name of the famous Sufi saint Khwaja Qutbuddin Bakhtiar Kaki, which was completed by Iltutmish in 1210. Aibak died of a sudden fall from a horse at Lahore while playing chaugan or polo. Qutbuddin Aibak's son Aram Shah had succeeded him in 1211. Since Aram Shah was an incapable ruler, he was overthrown by Iltutmish, the slave and son-in-law of Aibak. So children, in those days it was quite, it was not unheard of not keeping a slave. People frequently kept slaves. In fact, all rich people who could afford to keep servants, they had slaves. So this is why, see children, after Qutbuddin Aibak, his daughter, he married off his daughter also to a slave, Iltutmish, and he succeeded him to the throne. Iltutmish did not consider his sons as capable of becoming a sultan. So when we are talking about the 13th century, in those days also people had so much of foresight, or they were so advanced in their modern thinking, that they put a woman on the throne. Iltutmish, he therefore nominated his daughter Razia as his successor. But many Turkish nobles opposed this move because they considered it below their tradition to be ruled by a woman. So they crowned Iltutmish's son Ruknuddin as the new sultan. But within 7 months, Ruknuddin was removed from the throne and Razia became the first woman ruler of Delhi Sultanate in 1236. So this was all about the slave dynasty being ruled majorly by Qutbuddin Aibak, Iltutmish and his daughter Razia. Now I want you to give this all a thorough study. If there is something which you have not understood, we will discuss it when the school reopens. Till that time, stay safe, stay blessed. Thank you.